Hello, today I'm going to be talking about the board slash card game Unmatched Cobble Fog. Now, Unmatched system, I guess there's, quite a few games in this system, and they all have unique characters, but from what I understand, any of the characters can be used in with any of the other characters to battle. They each have their own unique decks and possibly sidekicks. Again, this is Cobble and Fog version of Unmatched, which comes with Dracula, Holmes and Watson, the Invisible Man, and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But from my understanding, you could play with any of these characters to have them fight any of the characters from any of the other Unmatched game systems. This is the only one I've ever played. I got this one for Christmas, this past Christmas, and I just got it out, decided to give it a try, so figured I would do a video on it. So let's get started with setup. First thing you'll do is place your battlefield in the middle of the play area. Now, this Unmatched Cobble and Fog comes with a two-sided board, so on one side you have a battlefield of Soho, and on the other side you have the battlefield of Baskerville Manor. That's the one I'm going to use because just for thematic reasons, I'm going to use Sherlock Holmes and Jekyll and Hyde in this example of play. So just for thematic reasons, I'm going to use the Baskerville Manor. You can use either side for any of the characters. I will mention I'll be going over the standard rules that are for a two-player game. You can play a 3 or 4 player team game, but I'm not going to cover those rules here. I'm sure it's similar, whether you're just playing on teams, but I'm just going to cover the standard 2-player rules in this overview. So again, let's get started back with setup. Alright, each player chooses a hero. I'm going to choose Sherlock Holmes for one of my players, and Dr. Jekyll slash Mr. Hyde for my other player. Each player will take their their corresponding 30 action cards, their character card, their hero's health dial, and then if they have any sidekicks, they take their sidekick's token. This is the Dr. Watson sidekick that comes along with Holmes, and Watson's health dial. Over here for the Dr. Jekyll player, I've got his 30 action deck, his character card, his health dial, and then he doesn't have a sidekick. He does have a token that determines whether he is Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde, so that comes with him. Each player looks at their character card and sets their starting health accordingly. So for Holmes, it is 16, so I've got it set to that. For Watson, it's 8, so I need to change his dial to 8, like so. And you can see for Dr. Jekyll, his starting health is 16 as well, so I've set it accordingly. Some characters may have a sidekick that do not have a health dial. In that case, the sidekick's health are just considered to be 1, so if they take 1 damage, they're eliminated. Each player shuffles their 30 action cards and then draws 5 cards into their hand, and that will be their starting hand. And then just make sure you have room for a discard pile. The rules say the younger player will place their figure on the number 1 space on the battlefield. So here, number 1 space you can see right here is at this point. I'll just, since I'm going to be the player for both of them, I don't have a younger side, so I'll just say Holmes will be the player on the number 1 spot. If they have any sidekicks, they'll then place them in the same zone as their fighter. The zones are spaces that are the same color, so Any of these spaces with this purple color, even this one that's a double space, because it does have some of the purple, it's all considered to be in this purple zone where Holmes is. So I could put his sidekick in any of those areas, and we'll just say I'm going to put Watson here. So you can see this board has several zones. All this gray area is considered a zone, all the green. And again, as I said, if it's got both, it's considered to be in both zones. We've got a zone, this space up here is considered to be in the green, the beige, and the brown zone. And the zone comes into play not only for placement like this, but also for ranged attacks. Two spaces that are connected by one of these black lines are considered to be adjacent. And some battlefields may have special rules, like this one has these spaces with these lock with a magnifying glass icon with a white line coming from them. Any of those spaces, those are secret passages, and they are considered to be adjacent to each other for movement purposes. So a figure could move, for example, from this space to this space for one movement, as they're considered adjacent for movement. They're not considered adjacent for attack or other effects. The older player will place their figure on space 2, and then if they had any sidekicks, they would place them following the same rules, so in a space in the same zone. That pretty much completes setup, and the younger player takes the first turn. Alright, so how does a player take a turn? Well, we can flip this card over, and it has a little player aid that tells you what you can do. So as you can see, it says you must take 2 actions. You may choose 2 different actions or the same actions twice. First action is maneuver. First possible action is maneuver. So if you choose maneuver, you have to draw a card from your deck. So first thing you do is draw that into your hand. Then you can move your hero, your fighters, so your hero or any sidekicks they have, up to their movement. Their movement is seen on the character card. So you can see these characters, both Holmes and Dr. Watson, can move up to 2 spaces when they take a maneuver. You'll see it always also says you can discard 1 card to boost your move. We haven't gone over all the icons on a card, but this little icon over on the right hand side of some cards is a boost amount. So if you use that to boost your maneuver, you discard that card and you can add that amount to your move. So instead of moving 2, you could move up to 4 spaces. So for instance, if Holmes chose to maneuver for one of his actions, he would draw a card into his hand. Then he could move both himself and Dr. Watson. Again, you can move up to 2 unless you decide to boost, and then depending on which card you boost with, you can add additional. But when you move, you just move into adjacent spaces. So 1, 2, that would be Holmes movement, and then Dr. Watson could also move. Now he can move up to 2, but you can't land in the same space as another figure. Friendly figures can move through each other, so Holmes could move through Watson when he's moving if he wanted to, or Watson could move through Holmes, but you can't move through an enemy figure. So if this figure was here, Holmes could not spend 2 to move through him. He would, if he wanted to maneuver, he would have to move a different direction. And you can move 1 or both of your figures when you choose maneuver. They don't have to both move the full amount. So if Holmes decided to move 2, as I showed earlier, Watson could decide to only move 1, or he could move the full 2, or if they boosted, they could move additional spaces. And if you did choose a card to use this number here to boost your maneuver, your movement, you discard that card. Anything else on that card is ignored. Alright, another kind of action you can do is to play a scheme. So if you have a card with this lightning bolt symbol on it, that is a scheme. If so, you play it down in front of you. When you play a scheme, you say which fighter is playing the card. So for instance, this one is Holmes. He would be the one playing that. They are then known as the active fighter, and then you just follow whatever it says down here for its effect. So in this case, choose an opponent, look at their hand, and choose one card for them to discard. And then once you've played that scheme, you just discard it into your discard pile. Now, for instance, if I had this scheme that says Dr. Watson um, as the fighter that's allowed to play that card, if Dr. Watson had already been defeated, in other words, his health had already been reduced to 0, then I could not play that scheme because Holmes is not allowed to play that card. So it would be pretty much useless to me in my hand, other than you could still play it for its boost value. So again, for an action, you can play a scheme. When you do, you play it down in front of you, declare which of your fighters is playing it, and then just follow whatever its effect is, and then discard it. Alright, we've talked about maneuver, we've talked about scheme. The final kind of action you have to take is to attack. So if you have a card with this symbol, that's an attack symbol. There are also cards with this symbol, which is known as a versatile card, which can be used as either an attack or a defense card. And then there are some cards that just have this symbol, which are just for defense. So when you take an attack action, you declare which of your fighters is making the attack. Then you'll declare the target. Of course, the target has to be a valid target. In other words, in a adjacent space if you're making a melee attack, or in the same zone as a player making a ranged attack. So in this case, nobody could make an attack because nobody would be a valid target. But I'll just say, for instance, Holmes was over here. Now he's adjacent to Dr. Jekyll, so he could have a valid target of Dr. Jekyll. And you can look at your character card here and you see that Holmes does melee attacks and Watson does ranged attacks. And I'll talk more about ranged attacks in a minute, but first let's talk about Holmes. If he was making a melee attack, which you can make against any adjacent space. So after you've said which of your fighters is making the attack, declared which is their target of the attack, you then choose one of the cards, an attack card that you're going to play. Now, of course, a scheme card is not an attack card, but I do have these versatile cards. Now, you can only play the card if the person making the attack is the person that can use that card. So, for instance, I could use this one for Holmes if Dr. Watson was the character making the attack. I could not play this versatile card for him because this one is only for Holmes. However, if it says any like these two do, then either of your characters could use that card. So again, as the attacker, you choose an attack card that you're going to play. You have to be somebody that can play it. For instance, if Holmes is attacking him, so you play it face down in front of you. Then the defending player they do not have to, they may play a card to defend with. In this case, Dr. Jekyll doesn't have any possible defense cards in hand, but I'll just dig one out for an example. So if he had this one, he could play it because he is Dr. Jekyll right now. His token shows he's Dr. Jekyll. So if this versatile card that can be used for attack or defense said Mr. Hyde on it, currently he's Dr. Jekyll, he would not be able to play this card. But since he is Dr. Jekyll right now, he could play this card for defense. Remember, the versatile card can be used for attack or defense. If it's just got the blue shield there, then it is only for defense. So we'll just say, for example, Dr. Jekyll had this card, and he'll place it face down in front of him. Once both players have chosen their card, they reveal them at the same time. First, you'll look for cards' effects. If any of them said immediately, those would be the first thing to resolve. This one is after combat. This is during combat, so there's no immediately. If two effects would take a place at the same time, like if Holmes had an immediately effect and Dr. Jekyll had immediately effect, the defender would always play theirs first. So in this case, Dr. Jekyll being the defender, he would play his first, and then Holmes would play his. But neither one has an immediate effect, so the next effect you take into account is during combat. So Holmes does have a during combat effect. Uh, Dr. Jekyll's is after combat, so next you'll resolve Holmes's during combat effect. So his during combat effect is to do strategy. You may change the printed value of your opponent's card to its boost value. If a card does not have a boost value, its value is treated as 0. Where its printed value is 2, its boost value is also 2. So that card really doesn't, that effect really doesn't matter much in this case. But if this card's printed value is 4, and it would get reduced to 2 since that's the boost value. So in that case it would come in handy, but as it is now it doesn't really matter much. So once you've resolved any during combat effects, then you move on to assigning damage, if any. So the attacker will deal damage to the defender equal to their attack value, which in this case is 3. But then you subtract the defender's defense value, which in this case is 2. So 2 from 3 is 1. So Holmes only does 1 damage to Dr. Jekyll. So Dr. Jekyll reduces health from 16 to 15. And that's done just by rotating the dial. So his health is reduced by 1. Then you resolve any after combat effects. So in this case, Dr. Jekyll's does have an after combat effect, so he can move up to 2 spaces and transform. Well, he will move up to 2 spaces and transform into Mr. Hyde. So when you're doing an effect on a card, you have to do it. Unless it says may or is otherwise specified that it's not mandatory, then it is mandatory. So he'll have to move up to 2 spaces. So, he can move over here, 1, 2, and then transform into Mr. Hyde just by flipping this over. If there were any other after combat effects, like a special ability on a character card, those would take effect. In this case we don't. We do have, I'll just mention Holmes' special ability is effects on Holmes and Dr. Watson cards cannot be canceled by an opponent. Effects on any cards can be canceled. So if the card says it can be played by Holmes or Watson and the other player plays in a card that cancels its effect, it can't be canceled if it's a Holmes or Watson card. But if it said any there, its effects can be canceled. And Dr. Jekyll has the card at the start of the game, or at the start of your turn, you may transform into Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde. While Mr. Hyde, after a maneuver, you take 1 damage. And then finally, cards that were played in combat are moved to the discard pile. I will mention that some after combat effects mention if you won the combat. The attacker is considered to have won the combat if they dealt any damage to the defender from their attack. Now that doesn't count any effects that were on the cards, but if from their attack value they managed to do any damage to the defender, then they're considered to have won that combat. So if an effect on a card said, if you won the combat, and you did deal at least 1 damage from your attack, again, not from any effects that were on your card, from your actual attack value, then you did win the combat. If a fighter's health is ever reduced to 0, they are defeated. So if that happens to a sidekick, then their token is just removed from the game and they're out of it. Or any of the sidekicks that just have 1 health, if they just take 1 damage, they're removed from the game. If your hero, your main character, so in this case Holmes or Jekyll or Hyde, are ever defeated, that means their health reaches 0, then that player loses. Alright, so after you've taken two actions, again, they can be two different actions. You can do a maneuver and an attack, or maybe two schemes or two maneuvers. But remember, each time you take a maneuver action, you draw one card into your hand. At the end of your turn, if you have more than 7 cards in your hand, you have to discard down to 7. And once you've done your two actions, discard it down to 7 if necessary. Then it's the next player's turn, and you just keep going back and forth like that until one of the heroes is reduced to 0 and defeated. Then the other player wins unmatched. So one thing to mention, as you're playing and you discard cards into your discard pile as they're played, if your deck ever runs out, you do not shuffle your discard pile and form a new deck. So once your deck runs out, you're considered to be exhausted. When you're exhausted, if you ever need to draw a card, for instance, because you did a maneuver action, or if some card that you play requires you to draw cards and you cannot draw cards because your deck is empty, you take 2 damage. And that's each of your fighters takes 2 damage for any card that you need to draw and can't. So just thought I'd mention that. And finally, before we move on to example turns, I just want to again mention range combat, and I did kind of mention it when we were talking about attacking, but if you have melee combat, you can only attack somebody in an adjacent space to you. But if you have a ranged combat, like we saw that Dr. Watson does for the Holmes and Watson character, Watson has ranged, so you can attack with an ranged attack. You can attack anybody in the same zone. So if Watson was here and Dr. Jekyll was here, he could attack him because the zone is he's in blue. This is in both the blue and the brown zone there. But anyway, he's in the same zone, so he could do a ranged attack and attack him. And if they were down here, he can do a ranged because he's in this gray kind of street looking zone, and Dr. Jekyll is over here, and he's considered to be in the purple and the gray zone, so he could do an attack from all the way over there because they're in the same zone. So as long as you're in the same zone as your target, if you have ranged attack, then you can attack them. Otherwise, if you only have melee, you have to be adjacent to them. Alright, let's do a few example turns. I got everything set back up how it should be right after we set up the game. They have their initial 5 cards that they drew. We said Holmes is the youngest player, so he's going to go first. So he has to take 2 actions. It's not optional. You do have to take 2 actions. So let's see. This is his hand of cards. We're going to say he's going to do a maneuver. So of course, if you maneuver, you draw 1 card into your hand. So we'll add that to his hand. And he's not going to boost, so his movement is 2. So he's going to move 2. So we'll say he'll move 2 here, and he will have Watson move 2. Watson doesn't have to move 2. He doesn't have to move at all. So you're not obligated to move the full 2. It's, up to whatever your movement is. But we will have Watson move 2. He's going to move up there. All right, so that's 1 action. We have to take another action. It could be another maneuver, in which case we would draw another card and move our characters again. But I think we'll do a scheme. We'll have Holmes is going to play this card, this scheme card. Choose an opponent, look at their hand, and choose 1 card for them to discard. So we get to look at the Dr. Jekyll player's hand. I'm going to have him discard this attack 5, so that'll go into his discard pile. Alright, then give him his cards back. And now this card goes into our discard pile, and that is our 2 actions. We don't have more than 7 cards, so we don't need to discard anything. So now it'll be the Dr. Jekyll player's turn. Okay, at the start of the Dr. Jekyll player's turn, he decides if he wants to transform into Mr. Hyde or Dr. Jekyll. I think he's going to stay Dr. Jekyll currently. Let's see what he's got. since he stayed Dr. Jekyll, he would not be able to play this Mr. Hyde card or this Mr. Hyde card because he's Dr. Jekyll currently. And these other two are the same, so we'll say he'll play this scheme. Recover 2 health, but he's at full health already, so that doesn't really do him any good. But then draw up to 3 cards, keep 1, and put any others on the bottom of your deck in any order. So we'll have him draw 3. And we'll say he's going to keep this Mr. Hyde one, and he'll put these 2 back. I don't think he cares about the order, and they will go to the bottom of his deck. Alright, so that goes into his hand. This is the one he played. That goes into his discard pile. And for his second action, he's going to maneuver. So he'll draw a card into his hand, and he will move 1, 2. Okay. He doesn't have more than 7 cards, so he doesn't have to discard. So now we move on back to the Holmes player. So he's got Dr. Watson is currently adjacent to Dr. Jekyll there. This isn't any card, so either player, either Holmes or Watson, can play that. So he's going to declare an attack. So of course he looks at his cards, chooses one. He's going to choose this one. He plays it face down. He says Watson is attacking. Dr. Jekyll is his target. This is the card I'm playing. I put it face down. So that now Dr. Jekyll has the opportunity to choose a card to defend with. He's got 2 possible, these 2 versatile cards, but they both say Mr. Hyde. Currently he's Dr. Jekyll, so he can't play either one of those, unfortunately. So he just says he's not going to play a card. So the attacking player will reveal his card. I mean, if they both played a card, they would both reveal them. Look if any said immediately. This one doesn't. It doesn't say during combat, so next you look and you see you're doing 3 damage. Remember, this is a versatile, can be used an attack or a defense. He's using it for an attack. So he's doing 3 damage. There's no defense because he wasn't able to play a card, so he's got to take 3 damage. So his health is down to 13. And now this after combat effect is if you won, the combat looks at, if you won the combat, which he did, because he did damage, he did at least 1 damage with his attack value to his opponent. If you won, look at your opponent's hand. So now he gets to look at his opponent's hand. He doesn't get to do anything, but he gets to see what he has. Alright, then this attack card is discarded. And that they've only used, the Holmes player has only used 1 action, so he still has another action he can do. So we'll say he's going to play a scheme. He's going to play this one. Confirm suspicion. Choose an opponent and name a value. Your opponent must choose and discard 1 card matching that attack or defense value. Well, we just looked at their cards, so we know they have cards with value of 4, so we're going to choose Dr. Jekyll and name a value of 4. So if your opponent must choose and discard 1 card matching that attack or defense value, their hero takes damage equal to the boost value of the discarded card. If they do not have a card of the named value, they must reveal their hand instead. Well, because we just looked at their hand, we know they had one with 4, so they're going to choose which one. Both of them have boost value of 2, so it doesn't really matter. So he's going to discard this one. Now he's got to take 2 additional damage. So now he's already down to 11 health. And this scheme is now discarded. That's going to be both of their actions. They don't have more than 7 cards, so they don't need to worry about discarding. Or this player. I keep saying they, but I'm referring to Holmes and Watson. They're the same player, though. Alright, we're back to this player. At the start of their turn, he decides he's going to turn into Mr. Hyde. And now he's going to take some action. So he's going to declare an attack. So he's going to, he's the attacker. He's declaring Dr. Watson as the target of his attack. And he's choosing this card this versatile attack defense card. Now the defending player can choose a card and play it face down. So they're the couple that are the same. So he's going to play this one. Once they both play their cards face down, they reveal them. If there's any immediately effects, those take place first. So there is one here. Cancel all effects on your opponent's card. So his after combat effect will not happen. So that's if there's then any during combat, except for his, which would be canceled, but he doesn't have a during combat. So now we go on to resolve the attack damage. So he did an attack of 4. He has a defense of 2, so Watson, who's the one being attacked, is going to take 2 damage, so we'll lower his health. So he's down to 6. Now this after combat does not take place because it was canceled, so these cards are now going to the discard pile. And that resolves that attack action. The Dr. Jekyll player still has another action. He's got a couple of Mr. Hydes, and he is currently Mr. Hyde, so he couldn't play this Dr. Jekyll card, but he can play one of these Dr. Hydes. They're the same, so he'll do that. He's going to play a scheme of Mr. Hyde, which is who he is right now. Place Mr. Hyde in any space in his zone. Mr. Hyde deals 2 damage to all adjacent fighters. So he'll just stay in his same space. His zone is the brown wood boards here, so he could be placed in any of those, but he wants to stay where he's going to be adjacent. So he could be placed here, or he can stay where he's at. And then he deals 2 damage to all adjacent fighters. Well, the only one adjacent to him is Dr. Watson, so now he's going to take 2 additional damage. So now Dr. Watson is down to 4 health. This card is now discarded. Definitely don't have more than 7 cards that I need to discard, so that's going to end Dr. Jekyll player's turn. We'll do one more turn for each player, so it's back to the Sherlock player's hand. These are the only cards he's got right now. We'll say he's going to do a maneuver because he wants to get Watson away from there, and he wants to get some more cards. So he's going to do a maneuver, so that allows him to draw a card, and then he can move up to 2, so he's going to move Watson back. He'll have Watson move 2 back, and Holmes will move up here. And then he's going to declare an attack. He's going to say Holmes is attacking. His target is Dr. Jekyll, and then he's going to choose a card. He can play this one because he is Holmes. He couldn't place this one because it's not Dr. Watson that's doing the attack. So he's going to play that face down. Alright, the opponent will decide if he's going to play any. He doesn't have any that are defense, so he's going to say he's not. So then Holmes player will just reveal his card. He'll look at his during combat. You may change the printed value of an opponent's card to its boost value. The opponent didn't play a card, so that doesn't matter. He does do an attack of 3, which is not defended against, so Dr. Jekyll has to take 3 additional damage. So he is now down to 8. And now this card is discarded. And that's 2 actions. They did the maneuver and attack, so now we're back to Dr. Jekyll's turn. At the start of his turn, he is going to turn back to Dr. Jekyll, and then for his first action, he's going to play this scheme, recover 2 health. Remember, he's Dr. Jekyll now, so he can play this, recover 2 health. So that puts him back up to 10, and then draw up to 3 cards, keep 1, and put any others on the bottom of your deck. So he'll draw 1, 2, 3. He's going to keep this one. So he'll put that in his hand. These go to the bottom of his deck. And this is one he played, so he discards it now. And then for his second action, he can't do an attack because he's not currently Mr. Hyde. He's Dr. Jekyll, and this attack card is for Mr. Hyde, so he can't play that. So he's going to maneuver. So that allows him to draw a card into his hand, and then he's going to move 1-2 back. And then now he's got these cards in his hand, and it would be the Sherlock Holmes player's turn now. So you keep going like that until, again, one of the hero characters is reduced to 0 health, and then the other player wins. I've only played this, once, and it's so far just solo, so it didn't last very long. I think it maybe took me about 20 minutes to play a game, and Sherlock did win, as it kind of looks like he's going to here. He's got Dr. Jekyll down to 10, and he's still at full health, and Holmes is down to 4, or Dr. Watson is down to 4. So anyway, I can't speak to the balance of the sides, and of course, as I mentioned, this set, Cobble and Fog, also comes with Dracula, and he's got some, I think they're Dracula's sisters. Anyway, those are like his sidekicks. And then it comes with the Invisible Man figure, which they kind of did that kind of cool, made him invisible. And he's got some, he doesn't have a sidekick, but he does have some like fog tokens that have their own special rules. But anyway, you can play these characters, fight with any of these characters against any of the other characters. The only ones I've tried so far are the Dr. Jekyll and Holmes. And also, as I said, if you have any of the other sets, you can supposedly play any of these characters against any of the other sets from any of the other match. So from the one game that I've played, I enjoyed it. I had fun. Look forward to play it against a real opponent at some point and see how I do. But I think it's fun, and hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.